The alarm didn't go off at 3:17 a.m. I just woke up. My eyes opened to the dark ceiling like someone had pressed a button I never installed. No noise. No nightmare. Just, awake. And then the thoughts started rolling in like trucks I never ordered. I stared at the ceiling fan. It wasn't moving. Nothing was moving. Except my mind, which was running a marathon I never signed up for. And somewhere in that darkness, a thought crept in that I didn't want to admit: is this just my life now? Waking up terrified of things I can't even name. But here's the thing nobody tells you about anxiety: it doesn't care about your theology. It doesn't care that you know all the right Bible verses. It doesn't care that you've been a Christian for 20 years. Anxiety shows up uninvited, sits on your chest at 3 a.m., and dares you to believe God is still good when everything inside you feels like chaos. The next morning, I sat in my living room with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. I hadn't taken a single sip. I just held it. The warmth had left, but I didn't have the energy to get up and microwave it. The room was quiet. But inside was a war zone. And I was losing. I don't know if you've ever been there. Sitting in a quiet room while your soul is screaming. Looking fine on the outside while everything inside you is falling apart. Holding a cold cup of coffee because even the simple act of reheating it feels like too much effort. Smiling at people while secretly wondering if God even hears your prayers anymore. But this morning was different. Not because the circumstances changed. The email was still unsent. The bill was still on the counter. The regrets were still there. But somewhere in the silence, beneath all the noise in my head, I heard something. Not an audible voice. Not a dramatic revelation. Just a whisper. A gentle invitation that felt both terrifying and comforting at the same time. Stop. Breathe. Stay here in my presence. I didn't want to stop. Stopping meant facing the thoughts I'd been running from. Stopping meant admitting I wasn't okay. Stopping meant being still when everything in me wanted to run, scroll, distract, do anything but sit in the uncomfortable silence with God. But the whisper wouldn't leave me alone. I remembered a verse I'd read hundreds of times but never felt in my bones until that morning. Psalm 46, verse 1, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. I'd quoted it. I'd highlighted it. I'd even put it on a coffee mug once. But sitting there with my cold coffee and my racing heart, I realized I'd never actually lived it. I'd never let God be my refuge because I was too busy trying to be my own. I'd never tapped into His strength because I was exhausted from pretending I had enough of my own. And here's where I need to be painfully honest with you. I used to think faith meant always being strong. Always having the right words to pray. Always feeling close to God. Always waking up with joy and purpose. But that morning, I couldn't pray. Not really. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. No eloquent words. No scripture declarations. No worship songs playing in my head. Just silence. And a sigh so deep it felt like my soul was exhaling for the first time in years. God, I can't do this anymore. That was my prayer. 6 words. No theology. No structure. No, in Jesus' name, at the end. Just a broken sentence from a tired person holding a cold cup of coffee at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. And you know what I learned that morning? Here's the truth I'm still learning to believe: sometimes faith isn't a polished prayer or a powerful declaration. Sometimes faith is just a shaky breath whispering, God, I can't do this anymore. Sometimes faith looks like sitting in silence because you have no words left. Sometimes faith is holding on to the edge of His robe when you can't even lift your eyes to heaven. That's a truth I want you to carry today. Write it down if you need to. Stick it on your bathroom mirror. Tattoo it on your heart. Sometimes faith isn't the loud declaration. Sometimes it's the exhausted whisper that barely makes it past your lips. I always thought I had to clean myself up before I could come to God. Fix my thoughts. Calm my anxiety. Arrange my life into something presentable. Then, and only then, could I approach Him. But that morning, sitting in my mess with cold coffee and unwashed hair and a mind that wouldn't stop spinning, I realized something radical. God doesn't wait for us to get our act together. He meets us in the chaos. He shows up in the 3 a.m. panic attacks. He sits with us in the living room while we stare at walls and hold cold coffee. He's not waiting at the finish line for us to arrive all cleaned up and perfect. He's right here, in the middle of the mess, saying, "Come to me. All of you. The exhausted. The anxious. The ones who can't pray pretty prayers. Just come." This morning, I realized something that changed everything for me. Anxiety isn't my enemy. It's not a sign of weak faith or spiritual failure. It's not proof that God has abandoned me. Anxiety is an invitation. A loud, uncomfortable, 3 a.m. invitation to stop pretending I'm strong enough on my own. It's the doorbell of my soul ringing, telling me I need a refuge bigger than my coping mechanisms. It's the signal that I've been trying to be God in my own life, and I'm not qualified for the position. So here I am. Still tired. Still holding coffee that's probably cold again. Still dealing with unsent emails and unpaid bills and regrets that visit in the night. But something shifted this morning. A crack of light in a dark room. A whisper that was louder than my anxiety. An invitation I'm finally ready to accept. That invitation led me to a place I never thought I'd be standing. A hospital parking lot at 5 p.m. Not the emergency room entrance. Not the cheerful lobby with the gift shop and the piano nobody plays. The parking lot. The place where you sit in your car and try to remember how to breathe before you walk through those automatic doors that smell like antiseptic and unanswered questions. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. My phone was face down on the passenger seat because I couldn't look at it anymore. Couldn't read another text from a family member asking any updates. Couldn't scroll through another search result that gave me 10 different worst-case scenarios disguised as medical information. I wasn't ready to become one of those someones. So I just sat there. Engine off. Keys still in the ignition. Watching people walk in and out like their lives weren't about to split into before and after. And somewhere in that silence, the kind of silence that's louder than any noise you've ever heard, a verse dropped into my mind like a stone into still water. Psalm 46 verse 1. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Ever-present help. Ever-present? Really? Because right now, God, I feel completely alone in this car. My hands are shaking. My stomach is in knots. And I can't feel you anywhere near me. That's the tension nobody warned me about. The gap between what I know is true and what my heart is actually experiencing. But in that moment, the theology I believed in my head was having a hard time traveling the 18 inches down to my heart. Here's where it gets painfully honest. My first reaction to that verse wasn't comfort. It was doubt. Not the intellectual kind of doubt you discuss in small groups over coffee. The raw, desperate kind. The kind that whispers, if you're really an ever-present help, where were you when the diagnosis came? Where are you right now while I'm sitting here terrified? Why do I feel like I'm facing this alone? Maybe you've been there. Maybe you're there right now. Sitting in your own version of that parking lot. Staring at your own set of windows with lights behind them. Gripping your own steering wheel, or your kitchen counter, or your phone, or just the edge of your sanity? And the question rises up from somewhere deeper than your theology: does God only show up when I'm doing everything right? Is His presence conditional on my performance? Is He only near when I'm reading my Bible consistently, praying eloquently, and showing up to church with a smile that convinces everyone I'm fine? That's the lie that almost took me out right there in that parking lot. The lie that God's nearness depends on my worthiness. The lie that trouble is proof of His absence rather than the very place His presence is most powerfully revealed. Because here's what I started to understand: not all at once, not in a lightning bolt moment, but slowly, painfully, like dawn breaking through a fog you didn't think would ever lift, trouble doesn't push God farther from you. Trouble becomes the very place where His nearness is revealed. I whispered those words again to myself there in the driver's seat, and for the first time in weeks, my breathing actually slowed. The truth settled over me not like a lightning bolt but like a gentle weight, pressing into the hollow places I'd been trying to ignore. Trouble doesn't push God farther from you. Trouble becomes the very place where His nearness is revealed. The parking lot wasn't proof that God had abandoned me, it was holy ground I simply hadn't recognized yet. My hands trembling against the steering wheel, that cold fear coiling in my stomach, the only prayer I could manage being a desperate, wordless help, none of that was faith failure. It was faith in its rawest, most honest form, stripped of pretense and polished words. And then, with tears still tracing warm lines down my cheeks, I did something that felt completely ridiculous. I placed both hands flat on the steering wheel, palms pressing into the worn leather, and I let myself just sit there in the silence that wasn't empty anymore. Ing wheel. I closed my eyes, right there in the parking lot where anyone could see me. And I whispered words I didn't even know I believed until they came out of my mouth. God, I'm giving you my fear. All of it. I don't know what those test results are going to say. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. I don't even know if I have the strength to walk through those doors. But I know you're here. Right now. In this car. At 5 p.m. on a Thursday. And I'm choosing to believe that your presence in this parking lot is more real than any diagnosis waiting inside that building. The tears came. But they weren't the same tears I've been fighting for the past hour. These weren't tears of despair. They were tears of surrender. The kind that fall when you finally stop trying to be strong enough on your own and let yourself be held by the one who never asked you to carry this alone in the first place. Here's a truth I want you to hold on to with everything you've got. Write it down. Tattoo it on your heart. Whisper it to yourself at 3 a.m. when the ceiling feels like it's closing in. Peace isn't knowing all the answers. Peace is knowing who's holding the questions. I didn't suddenly understand why this was happening. I didn't get a preview of the test results. No angel appeared in my passenger seat with a message from heaven. The circumstances didn't change one bit. But something shifted in me. Something broke open that needed to break. Something surrendered that had been fighting for control since the moment I woke up that morning. That's the holy exchange. My fear for His peace. My control for His presence. My desperate grip on the steering wheel for His unshakable grip on my soul. I opened my eyes. The hospital windows were still lit up. The doors were still waiting. Nothing in the natural had changed. But I wasn't the same person who had pulled into that parking spot 30 minutes earlier. I reached for the door handle. My hand was still shaking. But this time, it wasn't shaking alone. And that's when I discovered something bigger than a healing miracle. Something I never expected to find in a hospital parking lot at dinner time. The nearness of God doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes in the stillness. In the tears. The thing greater than a healing miracle is a heart that gets healed right in the middle of a trial that hasn't been taken away yet. But some things do. I want to tell you what happened after the parking lot. Not because the story has a dramatic ending, it doesn't. The test results came back. They were inconclusive. Which is a word that sounds like a fancy way of saying, we still don't know anything. More waiting. More appointments scheduled. More opportunities for my mind to spiral at 3 a.m. And yet, here's the part I'm still trying to find words for. Something broke open in that parking lot that didn't close back up when I walked through the hospital doors. Something shifted that didn't shift back when the doctor said, we need to run more tests. Something got healed that had nothing to do with my physical body and everything to do with the way I see God in the middle of uncertainty. Mirror moment, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That moment when you realize the external situation hasn't changed one bit, but you have. The bills are still on the counter. The email still needs a response you don't know how to give. The relationship is still fractured. The diagnosis is still pending. But somehow, you're breathing differently. Somehow, the weight on your chest that you've been carrying for months feels like it got redistributed overnight. You didn't fix anything. You didn't solve anything. But you're not the same person who woke up yesterday. God, I need you to fix this. God, please take this away. God, why haven't you answered yet? Page after page of me treating prayer like a complaint department. But the entry I wrote last night, the one after the parking lot, after the tears, after the surrender, it started differently. God, I don't know what you're doing. And I'm finally okay with that. That's not a victory march. That's not a testimony of breakthrough. That's the quiet, unglamorous work of a heart learning to trust. Here's a truth I'm still learning to live: faith isn't the absence of fear. Faith is believing there's someone greater than your fear who's standing with you inside of it. I used to think faith meant I had to stop being afraid. Like the goal was to reach some spiritual level where bad news wouldn't shake me, where uncertain futures wouldn't keep me up at night, where I could float through hard seasons with a serene smile and a perfectly memorized Bible verse for every occasion. That's not faith. That's denial with a cross necklace. Real faith looks a lot more like what happened in that parking lot. Hands shaking. Heart pounding. Mind racing through every worst-case scenario. And still, whispering through tears, God, I'm giving you my fear. All of it. I don't know what those test results are going to say. But I know you're here. Real faith isn't pretending the storm isn't real. Real faith is knowing who's in the boat with you while the waves are crashing over the sides. I went back to Psalm 46 this morning. The same verse I've been clinging to since this whole journey started. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. But I read it differently this time. Slower. Like I was tasting each word instead of just swallowing them whole. Refuge. I always pictured a fortress. High walls. Impenetrable gates. A place where trouble couldn't reach me. But that's not what I found in the hospital parking lot. The refuge wasn't a soundproof room where I couldn't hear the bad news. The refuge was God's presence wrapped around me right in the middle of the storm. The trouble was still there. The fear was still real. But I wasn't facing it alone. And strength. I thought strength meant the ability to carry the weight without breaking. The kind of strength that lets you say, I've got this, and actually mean it. But the strength God gave me in that parking lot wasn't the ability to pretend I was fine. It was the strength to admit I wasn't. The strength to stop performing. The strength to let myself be held by someone who never asked me to carry this alone in the first place. Memorable truth: God's strength doesn't always look like standing tall. Sometimes it looks like finally letting yourself fall because you know He's going to catch you. This morning, as I sat with my reheated coffee and my tear-stained journal, I realized something that rearranged something deep inside my soul. I am no longer a victim of my anxiety. I am a child being led by my father, one step at a time. The bills are still on the counter. The emails are still waiting for responses I don't have yet. The test results are still inconclusive. Nothing in my external world has been magically resolved overnight. But the person sitting at this kitchen table is not the same person who woke up at 3:17 a.m. with a ceiling fan that wasn't moving and a mind that wouldn't stop. I'm not waiting for the storm to end anymore. I'm learning to recognize the one who's been standing next to me the whole time. And maybe that's the whole point. Maybe the healing we're all desperately praying for isn't always the removal of the circumstance. Maybe sometimes the deeper healing, the one God is most concerned with, is the healing of a heart that's learned to see His presence more clearly than it sees the problem. I placed both hands flat on the kitchen table. Same posture as the steering wheel. Different location. Same surrender, but this time, it felt less like a white-knuckled grip and more like an exhale. The kitchen was still, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the warmth of the coffee mug cradled between my palms. That heat became a quiet anchor, a small mercy reminding me I was here, held, even now. And I prayed. Not the kind of prayer you'd hear from a pulpit. Not polished. Not theological. Just real. Just raw. Just a child talking to their father in the quiet of a Thursday morning, the steam from my coffee curling upward like a whispered offering. Father, I'm still scared. I'm not going to pretend I'm not. The unknown is still unknown. The answers are still pending. But I'm not carrying it the same way I was yesterday. There's no panic in my chest this morning, just a tender ache, a holy stillness I can't explain. I'm giving you the 3 a.m. wake-ups. I'm giving you the emails I don't know how to answer. I'm giving you the weight that sat on my ribs like a stone. Take it, Father. I trust you with what I can't see, know how to answer. I'm giving you the test results I'm still waiting for. I'm giving you the relationships that feel broken beyond repair.